Hello and welcome into the KE Report. I'm your host, Shad Markwitz, and today we're getting an update on Goliath Resources, traded on the TSX.V under the ticker GOT and on the OTCQB under the ticker GOTRF. And we're joined with the founder and CEO of Goliath Resources, Roger Rosmus. And Roger, always great getting you on the show to get an update on Goliath and the exploration program that you really just wrapped up. Now, this was a big program in 2024 that you upsized from the initial program. I think initially you were looking at 15,000 meters or so, but with the plan to upsize it if you were seeing what you wanted to see. And now you came in at 38,125 meters drilled at the Golddigger Property in the Golden Triangle of British Columbia. You had a press release out on October 10th that did a nice job of just summarizing all the different holes and the different areas. Let's dive into that and maybe just give us a snapshot of what happened in the 2024 drill program.
Sure. Yeah, Shad. Great. Thanks for having me back on. Yeah, definitely a lot of meat on the bone on this one. You could definitely take several hours going through this, rereading, et cetera. But yeah, bottom line is, we were started out with a season with a fairly smallish program and testing new areas that we had sort of, I guess, delineated, figured out, working the new models and so on, where we'd see more of the higher grade type material. Of the holes drilled this year, we got like 92% of these holes contain, visible gold and or abundant visible gold. So from that point of view, probably increases our probability of the assays should come back positive, we would think. Obviously, we have to wait till it comes back from the labs, but no, we were very excited about it, and hence, why we upsized the program. Certainly, there was the money of us available that we were able to go raise. I think the total raise this year was about close to $23 million if you count the raise we did, I guess it was August timeframe-ish. But yeah, so we were able to raise the capital and biggie size the program. And obviously we drilled the new target up on the Camber Icefield Treasure Island, which takes about 3,000 meters of that 38,000 that we're talking about here, which again, that one looks really good as well. 12 holes, looking at similar looking type of rock from channel samples and grab samples we're seeing at surface that ran, I guess, over 28 grams per ton gold equivalent, and some of the samples were up to 14% copper. So I kind of digressed there a little because there is so much in here. For me, the highlight is obviously the VG in all the holes we're seeing, the similar looking mineralization that we're seeing up at Treasure Island in those 12 holes, of which on average, again, this is Treasure Island, we're seeing the best hole from each pad, 4 pads, 12 holes. We're seeing close to 30 meters of mineralization that we're seeing at surface, of which within that contains roughly 7 meters of this massive to semi-massive looking stuff where, the calco is just kind of dripping off this thing. So it's really exciting stuff. And then I guess really the big highlight for me here at the Surebet is delineating this bonanza high-grade gold triangle where we have several holes running over 1 ounce per ton gold. That's not gold equivalent, that's gold. And up to, in some instances, up to 9 meters, or actually over 9 meters, pretty much true width. So in that area, in the bonanza, in addition to, we've got these 10 stacked mineralized zones and splays and so on, we've delineated a really nice area within the bonanza, which is that contact between the Hazelton Seds above and the volcanics below, where we stepped out, 720 meters to the northwest and 612 meters to the south, to the southeast. And, within that area, again, we've got 19 holes in there. A number of the holes, again, are over 1 ounce up to 9 meters true width. And, as an example, this one step out here, hole 272, we intercepted 16 meters of mineralization that looks very similar to, what we're seeing at some of these other higher grade holes. Obviously, assays pending. And then hole 273, which kind of completes the triangle. We had 9 meters of mineralization. And just keep in mind, all these holes drilled within the triangle all had, again, the visible gold and or abundant visible gold. And we're classifying abundant visible gold as more than 4 occurrences in there. So, if this triangle area, assume it's, average, let's say 5 meters, like lowball it, there's could potentially some sizable tonnage here. And, we think maybe we could have another sort of a premier type of scenario where, Premier Mine, initially they had, I think it was like 1 million ounces at I think it was like half an ounce per ton gold there. So that's what got that mine going. And I think they produced, or the deposit was kind of around 9 million ounces of gold there. But obviously, I'm not saying that we've got 9 million ounces, but it's something that most seniors look forward to is. And when looking at assets is there like a grade zone of 1 to 2 to 3 million ounces of super high grade that's going to pay for capex out of the gate, and certainly at this point that this bonanza triangle has a lot of characteristics that, assuming assays deliver, there could be a substantial amount of gold here.
Okay, appreciate you breaking that down in the Bonanza Gold Triangle there, Roger. And it is exciting to see where some of these holes are intersecting an area that really adds to that Surebet zone, Bonanza zone, and some of the other areas. But you had a couple new discoveries this year, or new areas we can talk about. We did tease this a little bit in our last discussion, but I'd like to dive into them each one at a time here. One of them was this new deep zone that the team encountered, and these are kind of these stacked lenses. So these are far below some of these other lenses. We're still waiting on the assays, but give a little color to what this new deep zone could look like.
Yeah, so there's four, I guess, shares that we're seeing down there, are veins, you want to call it. At the time when we reported hitting it, we hadn't done or had completed the logging, but a number of these veins actually have visible gold in them as well. So, and this is way below, quite far below the valley floor. We're talking, close to 500, and I think it's close to 500 meters below the valley floor. So this is like the deepest hole that we've drilled to date below the valley floor, with visible gold. We've got lead, zinc, copper, and silver. By the looks of what we're seeing, based on the galena and sphalerite, so that we know that carries the silver, and the chalco as well, carrying the copper. So it tells us that the system remains open. Guess what? We don't know how big it is yet. It's getting bigger and bigger. So every year we drill, the system seems to get bigger, which is a good thing to have, because most instances, a lot of these projects start really big, and then the more you drill, the smaller they get. This is definitely not the case.
Yeah, nice to see the lenses keep on stacking, Roger, and it keeps growing at depth, so it's still open. And then there's also some new kind of mineralization. Now, we earlier in the year had talked about the mothership feeder zone, which is different than the new deep zone because it's a kind of a reduced intrusion related mineralization where you have the bismuth in there and the moly and some just different minerals pathfinders that kind of give you it's a different kind of mineralization. But you also went out and made a new discovery in this drill program this year called the Blue Origin Discovery. And it's that same kind of reduced intrusion kind of mineralization. And people may be familiar with the success Snowline Gold has had, that same kind of mineralization. So maybe just walk us through these mothership feeder zones and this Blue Origin Discovery. What's going on with this other type of mineralization?
Sure. Well, until this year, we really ignored the dykes because they have typically proven to be barren of any type of mineralization or economical mineralization. And this year we found quite a bit of visible gold in these dykes, which do run sort of parallel, sort of north-south, through these horizons that we have there. So, we don't have the high concentration of these sort of gold quartz veinlets that carry the bismuth, the VG, and the moly, but they're quite substantial, quite large. And if we get 2 to 3 of these per meter, and if it's running 10 grams gold equivalent, let's say, as an example, I mean, that could add a lot of tonnage to a potential maiden resource. So based on that, we went back and relogged 17 holes from 2021 to 2023 that had similar looking type of mineralization. So we actually ended up sending over 850 samples, I think it was, for assay. So again, that's part of this 105 holes that have assays pending. And then further to that, we went and did some further exploring to the south, where we know there's a lot of this intrusive looking type of rocks, are certainly outlined by the BCGS, where all this ground was open. And guess what? We just staked it. Staked everything, actually. Went from 66,000 hectares to over 91,000 hectares. The main area was the Blue Origin, 4.5 kilometers south of the Surebet, where we're getting the similar type of veinlets cutting through, stacked veinlets cutting through the side of this mountain, where, sort of partway down the mountain, you can just see these veinlets cutting all the way through, sort of a horizontal. And so we took a number of channel cuts and grabs and so on. And, if they run through the assays, we'll probably end up drilling this next year, which would be a brand new discovery, which again, part of the thought is possibly this is maybe where the feeder source came from and somehow got remobilized. So again, that's super exciting for the shareholders and obviously the team itself. And we'll wait and see. We're on standby.
Well, it is exciting, and the fact that it's 4 kilometers away and it could be a potential feeder source. I know you got even another target that we're going to talk about here, which is Jackpot, which could also potentially be a feeder source. But you've made the point before, and I think it's a great point, Roger, that it really doesn't matter if it is or it isn't. It could be a whole other zone, and if that's the case, and you got Surebet Part 2 or some other area just 1 or 2 mountains over, that's not going to make anybody upset either. So let's also talk about Jackpot. It's about 1.5 kilometers away from Surebet, but it's got a lot of copper in there along with the gold. And you had some really nice channel samples last year, the team did, but you did put some holes in there this year. So a lot of people are jacked up about Jackpot. Let's hear about it, Roger.
Yeah, no, definitely. Certainly, ever since we found this 7 millimeter nugget, this wire gold sitting in at a vein in situ, which was close to a sample that we took the previous year that was 636 grams per ton gold. And so we put in a bunch of holes there, and assays are pending. We'll see what happens. Is it a brand new kind of like a piano key, a repeat of what we're seeing at Surebet, or is it a part of the feeder? We just don't know at this particular juncture. But once we have assays back, it's going to definitely help us paint the picture a lot better.
Well, and while we're painting the picture with so much focus, and rightly so, having been at the Surebet Discovery in that area and continue to push it at depth, when you've got things like Blue Origin, when you've got targets like Jackpot, when you've got targets up in the Cambria icefields like Treasure Island, and there's other targets up in the Cambria icefields that you haven't got to yet, how should people think of this company? Because it's a lot bigger now than just the Surebet Discovery. Is it going to be a multi-regional exploration company? Is there going to be multiple areas of focus on next year's program? How is it all coming together, Roger?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly what we're seeing in the core from Treasure Island. Obviously, we had awesome results again with the channels and some of the grabs running up to 28 grams per ton gold equivalent and up to 14% copper. Assuming the drill core is going to run where, again, we've got at least 7 meters on average from at least, well, all 4 pads on average, where if we're receiving that kind of mineralization in assays, then obviously we'll have to expand a drill program for 2025. But to the bigger question, in the Cambria Icefield is a big chunk of the property. We've only been able to really ground truth 5 or 6 other targets that we've seen mineralization at surface. And whether they get developed into a drill target, that's yet to be seen. Well, I mean, right now we're going to focus on Treasure Island because that was the lowest hanging fruit of all the other new outcrops that we're seeing. But every year there's new outcrops. So as the glacier recedes and the permanent snowpack no longer there, it's just, I think it holds like a huge treasure chest for us of brand new discoveries on an ongoing basis.
Well, and Roger, I'm sure you get this question every day, and we've had some people send in the same questions, and that is the timing on some of the assays, because you've got the drilling completed now at all these different targets, 105 holes. I know that you're doing 2 different kinds of assays. You're doing the photon assays where you can actually log all of the mineralization in the hole as opposed to just sections of it, but you're also doing multi-element assays. So maybe just unpack what you think the timeline is and maybe the sequence of events for how some of these holes will start being reported to the market.
Yeah, no, we're super excited to obviously get results because we haven't seen anything. We're essentially blacked out from the labs as they're doing their work. And really the plan is to announce sort of, let's say, a batch of, call it 6 holes as an example per load, because we have the Surebet upper, Surebet lower, we got Bonanza, we've got Goldzilla, Eldorado, etc. So instead of just putting out like one hole, it doesn't really give any context as to what the heck it means. So with the idea of, packaging these together, we could get some context as to what like an average width and average grade, and sort of, apply that to the various loads that we're having at Surebet, because there's 10 there in total, but there's 6 really that are the main loads. But yeah, we did switch gears sort of I guess sort of a quarter of the way through the program. We were using one supplier, and then we were convinced to use the photon assay protocol. And so now that put a bit of a bottleneck on certain things where, it had to get crushed photon assay and then go to the one supplier. So which would mean that we're actually behind all the other companies, sending in product every day, because typically the one supplier was just doing the metallic screening for the gold, and then doing the multi-element analysis for like the silver and copper and moly and all these other things. So we're a bit of a behind, I guess, in that regard, hence the delay. However, we have now secured a second supplier along with the photon assay, so it'll be under one roof where we don't lose our place in the queue. So, what does that all mean? It means that we actually might get samples or assays back from holes we drilled later on in the year versus the ones further at the beginning of the year, just based on sending course rejects back to photon assay folks, and then being back in the queue for the multi-element analysis from our initial supplier of doing the assays. So bottom line is the gold, or whatever is contained in the mountain's not going anywhere, and obviously we'll try and get them out as soon as we can, but we're really at the waiting for the assays from these suppliers, so we can't rush that process.
All right. Well, I think there's a lot of excited investors looking forward to seeing the assays as they come in, whatever order it is. If some of the holes that were drilled late in the season come in before the initial holes were drilled, it's all right. I think people are just excited to see some of the results from this year's program, because it looks like a lot of good science was done. But let's also talk about the funding. You put out some news on October the 3rd, and it basically announced that you had closed the final tranche of your private placement, which was upsized a couple of times. And Roger, we actually haven't talked about this on the show yet, but I mean, initially started at one level and you just kept adding it. Seemed like there was 4 press releases or 5 press releases where it kept getting bigger, and that's because of the interest from some key strategic shareholders that either re-upped or added to, or some new ones that came in. So maybe just talk to what that does for the company. How does that set you up as far as moving into next year? And just talk a little bit about some of the people that came on board and participated.
Sure. Yeah, good point. Also, let's not forget about the raise that we completed in, I guess it was in early September. So there was like 6.5 million there as well. So in total, between, let's call it the last couple months here, I raised over, $22.6 million in a tough market. What does that tell us? Guess what? It tells us that we have a world-class discovery on our hands. And to your point, we've attracted a new large shareholder based out of Singapore, a global commodity group, who now own, I guess it's about 3.5% of the company. Rob McEwen, who's already a shareholder, he upped his position. He's now at 3.8% thereabouts. Obviously, Crescat Capital participated, and a new individual, Mr. Larry Childress, who actually was the second largest shareholder in Noront before it got taken out by, I think it was Wailu for, I think around $700 million. And then currently he's actually the second largest shareholder of Fireweed Metals, second in behind the Lundin family. So we've got a pretty amazing shareholder base, certainly with his strategic cornerstone investors. Also, Eric Sprott is in there as well. He got in super early. He came in 2021, just after Crescat Capital. So, I think we're in a very great position to have these type of folks on our share register. And certainly, they're doing their due diligence, before they invest, and, should give comfort to other investors that are possibly looking to take a position. So, and these guys, no one likes to lose money. And clearly, these titans in the finance/mining space, they've done very, very well for themselves and having an amazing name, and which, bodes well for Goliath and all its shareholders.
Well, and Roger, what does that leave the company with going into 2025 to kick off next year's program?
Yeah, no, we're going to be really well funded actually going into 2025. We can get a nice program out of the gate, and certainly from G&A side, we've got enough G&A for quite some time. And also keep in mind, we've got about $9.5 million of warrants that start to expire April, May, around 78 cents, I think is that strike price. But that's all in 2025. They all expire. So I would imagine we have warrants from 15 cents all the way up to, I guess, 92 cents. And, we're currently trading at around $1.30 Canadian. And, based on, positive results, some good catalysts here, I would expect a re-rate higher on the share price or market cap, and that those warrants would be exercised. So we could be sitting with another another $9.5 million sitting in the treasury for us in 2025, which would ultimately reduce any financing that we may need to do to an extensive drill program next year.
All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there for today, Roger. But I guess the point is you got a lot of assays to report from really most of this drill program and no real need to raise any capital in the near term. So there's just catalyst coming down the road here and not that overhang. And if anything, there's that kicker from the warrants that are in the money that could even bring in more capital, set you up for a solid 2025, kicking things off next year. But I think people are excited to be following along with the results from this year as they start coming in. We'll definitely follow along with them here at the KE report. And if people listening in want to do the same, definitely click on the link below this interview. It takes you right over to the company website, straight to their news section, so you can follow along with the drill assays, whatever batches are released, Roger, and looking forward to our next conversation.
Yeah, you bet, Shad. Look forward to that. And, we look forward to getting those assays out and obviously making some sense of them and sending that out in a press release to the public.